Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tim Ferriss, and welcome to another edition of The Tim Ferriss Show. This is an in-between-isode. It is a short audio essay as opposed to the longer-form interviews that I tend to do on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. Those usually run about 1 to 2 hours. This will probably be less than 15 minutes total. I did have some complaints after my last episode, which featured some editing. I had bleeped out some profanities. So today's leading wisdom, the quote that I'll start us off with is, "You's a fine motherfucker, won't you back that ass up?" All right, now that we've covered that, feeling frisky, folks, I'm going to move on to today's essay, which is intended to give you some tidbits, some food to digest, something to feed your brain over the weekend or the week, and ideally to give you some tactics and tips that you can really apply to your own life to increase your productivity or your perceived sense of well-being. And the essay today, which shall not be edited, partially because I don't know how, secondly because I am namakemono da yo, namakemono. That is lazy bastard, sloth in Japanese, namakemono da. This essay is called, and some of you may have come across this, it was making the rounds a while ago, became very popular, Productivity, in quotation marks, Tricks for the Neurotic, Manic Depressive, and Crazy Like Me. And this essay is really intended to perhaps remove a few illusions that people have about those they aspire to be like, or those they look up to. And hopefully it's very empowering. So here it goes. Productivity Tricks for the Neurotic, Manic Depressive, and Crazy Like Me. I originally wrote this essay months ago, but I've been too self-conscious to publish it until now. The following quote convinced me to put on my big girl pants and get it done. Quote, "The moment that you feel that, just possibly, you're walking down the street naked, exposing too much of your heart and your mind and what exists on the inside, showing too much of yourself, that's the moment you may be starting to get it right." End quote. And that is from Neil Gaiman, one of my favorite writers, from a commencement speech that he gave at the University of the Arts, which you can find on my blog if you want to give it a search. So here goes with the essay, and I hope it helps at least a few of you. Part 1, reality check. A few months ago, I had a birthday party. It comes every year, of course. A dozen friends and I gathered for several days of wonderful sun, beach, and catching up. On the last day, however, I didn't get up until 11:30 a.m., knowing full well that the last remaining friends were leaving at 12 noon. I was afraid of being alone. Seems kind of silly, right? Like a child, I hid my head under the covers, literally, and hit snooze until reality couldn't be postponed any further. But why am I telling you this? What's the point of the story? That leads us to part 2. The dangerous myths of successful people, and successful is in quotation marks here. We all like to appear successful, a nebulous term at best, and the media like to portray standouts as superheroes, right? So there's a survivorship bias. You always see the rock stars, the people on top of the world on the covers of the magazines. Sometimes these dramatic stories of overcoming the odds are inspiring. More often, however, they lead to an unhealthy knee-jerk conclusion from people who are reading these magazines, seeing the TV profiles, and so on. And that is, well, maybe they, entrepreneur, artist, creator, painted as a superhero, can do it, but I'm just a normal guy. I'm just a normal girl. How could I possibly do that? And this essay is intended to give a behind-the-scenes look at my own life. Though I've occasionally done profiles like A Day in the Life with Morgan Spurlock's crew, which was really fun. You can check it out online. I rarely let journalists follow me around for a normal day. And they always ask, like, let's follow you around for a standard day, a normal day. Why don't I do this? Well, to start off, I'm no superhero. I'm not even a consistent normal. To give you an idea, in the last 3 months, I've cried while watching Rudy. I've repeatedly hit snooze for 1 to 3 hours past my planned wake time because I simply didn't want to face the day. I've considered giving everything away and moving to Montreal, Seville, Iceland. The location depends on what I'm trying to escape. I've seen a therapist for the first time as I was convinced that I was doomed to lifelong pessimism. I've used gentlemanly websites to, let's call it, relax during the day when I clearly have urgent and more important shit to do. I've taken my daily caffeine intake, read self-medication, so high that my resting pulse was 120 plus beats per minute. That's nuts. 8 to 10 cups of coffee per day minimum. I've worn the same pair of jeans for a week straight just to have a constant, something to cling to during weeks of chaos. Okay, that seems pretty dysfunctional, right? Does not really seem like the picture of effectiveness, efficacy, and efficiency, and so on that you might expect me to be. Well, that's true. But in the last 8 weeks, I've also increased my passive income 20+%, bought my dream house. I've been meditating twice per day for 20 minutes per session without fail. This marks the first time I've ever been able to do that consistently. I've cut my caffeine intake to next to nothing. That's in the last 4 weeks, usually having pu'er tea in the morning and green tea in the afternoon. I've had no more than 1 cup of coffee per week. I'll probably elaborate on this in a future essay or post. With your help, we've raised $100,000+ for charity water for my birthday. We've raised $250,000 in 53 minutes for a startup that I'm involved with. I signed one of the most exciting business deals of my life, certainly of the last 10 years anyway. I've added roughly 20 pounds of muscle after learning the pain and joy of high-rep front squats and topical DHEA courtesy of Patrick Arnold. You can check him out. He's a fascinating guy. I've transformed my blood work, realized once again that manic depressive symptoms are just part of entrepreneurship, and I've come to feel closer to all of my immediate family members. Okay, that's quite the laundry list, quite the mouthful. But that leads us to part 3. The point. What's the point of all this? Most superheroes are nothing of the sort. They're weird, neurotic creatures who do big things despite lots of self-defeating habits and self-talk, right? I'm no exception. That's me too. Personally, I suck at efficiency, doing things quickly, that is. Here's my coping mechanism, an 8-step process for maximizing efficacy instead, doing the right things, okay? Because hard work doesn't solve impotent goals and unclear priorities. It actually magnifies and multiplies all the problems. So I focus on efficacy, doing the right things. What are my 8 steps? Number 1, wake up at least 1 hour before you have to be at a computer screen. Email is the mind killer. Number 2, make a cup of tea, I like pu'er tea, and sit down with a pen or pencil and paper. Number 3, write down the 3 to 5 things and no more that are making you most anxious or uncomfortable. They're often things that have been punted from one day's to-do list to the next, to the next, to the next, and so on. The stuff you put off. Most important usually equals most uncomfortable. There's oftentimes some chance of rejection or conflict. So if you don't know what's most important, ask yourself, what is making me most uncomfortable? So for each of these 3 to 5 things that you've written down, I used a Post-it note typically because it's constrained. There's a limited amount of space. For each of these items, ask yourself, if this were the only thing I accomplished today, would I be satisfied with my day? Okay, I'll repeat that. For each of these items, if this were the only thing I accomplished today, would I be satisfied with my day? And the second question you ask is, will moving this forward make all the other to-dos unimportant or easier to knock off later? So is this thing a force multiplier, right? If I handle this one thing, will it make all the other to-dos either irrelevant or easier to do? Step number 5, look only at the items you've answered yes to for these questions. Okay, so that should narrow your list of, say, 3 to 5 down to maybe 2, probably 1. Then, step number 6, block out 2 to 3 hours to focus on one of them. One of them for today. That's it. Let the rest of the urgent stuff, the less important stuff slide. Okay, you pay some penalties, a few people get pissed off. Who cares? The world will not end. It will all still be there tomorrow. So block out 2 to 3 hours and focus on one of those items for today. Step number 7, to be very clear, block out 2 to 3 hours to focus on one of them for today. This is one block of time, right? Cobbling together 10 minutes here and there to add up to 120 minutes does not work at all. It's a single block of time. And you might be able to spare the time for these interruptions, but you can't afford the distraction of being pulled in and out of trying to focus. All right, so one single block of time, 2 to 3 hours. Step number 7 If you get distracted or start procrastinating, don't freak out and downward spiral, which is what I used to do. Just gently come back to your one to-do item. Meditating regularly helps with this not freaking out and just coming back to that one to-do item. Those are the 8 steps. Congratulations. That's it. You are now a master of productivity. This is the only way I can create, personally, big outcomes, less than 15 minutes total. I did have some complaints after my last episode, which featured some editing. I had bleeped out some profanities. So today's leading wisdom, the quote that I'll start us off with is, "Use a fine motherfucker, won't you back that ass up?" All right, now that we've covered that, feeling frisky, folks, I'm going to move on to today's essay, which is intended to give you some tidbits, some food to digest, something to feed your brain over the weekend or the week, and ideally to give you some tactics and tips that you can really apply to your own life to increase your productivity or your perceived sense of well-being. And the essay today, which shall not be edited, partially because I don't know how, secondly because I am namakemono da yo, namakemono. That is lazy bastard, sloth in Japanese, namakemono da. This essay is called, and some of you may have come across this, it was making the rounds a while ago, became very popular, "Productivity," in quotation marks, "Tricks for the Neurotic, Manic Depressive, and Crazy Like Me." And this essay is really intended to perhaps remove a few illusions. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tim Ferriss, and welcome to another edition of The Tim Ferriss Show. This is an in-between-isode. It is a short audio essay as opposed to the longer form interviews that I tend to do on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. Those usually run about 1 to 2 hours. This will probably be